and welcome to the Cleverly Changing Podcast. Our podcast is all about learning how you can educate your kids. I'm one of the hosts, Elle, and this is episode 25. If you're a new listener, we are excited to have you join us. I'm an entrepreneur, mom to twin girls, and this podcast is not only for parents who homeschool their children, but it is for all parents who want to supplement their child's education. Our goal is to provide you with encouragement, support, insight about African history, and just overall encouragement to continue to educate your kids. New episodes are uploaded bi-weekly, so please remember to subscribe and share. Today's African proverb is, "Only a wise person can solve a difficult problem." And that is an Akan proverb. It's now time for the word of the episode. Dun, dun. Bingwa means winner or champion in Swahili.
This is Cleverly Cultured Kids!
Today's Cleverly Cultured Kids episode is very short, but it's in honor of Black History Month and the pioneers who've come before us. So we have one report by Amira, and she's going to tell you about one of her favorite pioneers. And it's a young woman like her. So thank you so much for sharing your pioneer with us.
I chose Gabby Douglas. The reason why I chose Gabby Douglas is because she was my first role model. Gabby Douglas is a U.S. women's gymnast. At the 2012 London Summer Olympics, she won gold medals in both the team and individual all-around competitions. She is the first woman of color of any nationality and the first African American gymnast in Olympic history to become the individual all-around champion.
Hi, welcome to the Cleverly Changing Podcast. We have an amazing guest tonight, and we're going to let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her homeschool experience or just home education in general. So if you could introduce yourself to our audience, that would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me on the podcast. My name is Njeri Nembhard, and I have been a homeschool parent since I first had my kids. So my son is going to be 18 this year. He's 17 right now. My daughter is going to be 15. So we pretty much started homeschooling from birth. And then that means, just teaching everything at home. And then when school time came, we decided, we just went ahead and put them in school. But every time they would come home, we would always have educational activities that we would do. And that just went on. When they come home from school, they do their homework if they had any, and we'd also do some educational activities. And that went on for a while up until my son was going into 6th grade and my daughter was going into 2nd. And then we just decided that, why are we doing this all the time? Let's just teach them at home, because they seem to be getting more, and there were other things going on as well. So then we just pulled them out and decided to homeschool since then. So since then, I would say for about 10 years, we've been homeschooling full time.
Wow, 10 years is a really long time.
Indeed.
So you're a veteran at this.
If you could call it that, yeah. I mean, I have my experiences, definitely, lots of experiences.
So one of the things that we try to do on our podcast is let parents know everybody that listens isn't a homeschooler, but the podcast really centers around home education and supplementing. So even though not everybody has that privilege to homeschool their kids, because it's really, it's a privilege to be
Yes,
able to stay at home with your kids and homeschool them.
it
So
is.
for those who, are supplementing, to know that, hey, I can, be doing things at home with my kids to really enrich their education. That's really what we're here for. We want to empower our community with certain information so that their kids will be knowledgeable. We don't want just the history books at school to be their only resource to know who they are.
Right.
Absolutely. And I love that you say that, because homeschool is not for everybody. And so it's not the only path or the best path, or if you're not homeschooling, you're not doing the right thing.
Right.
Not at all. I don't believe in that at all. And so, yeah, I love that you brought all that up. Yes.
Well, let me ask, what kinds of things were you using or doing to supplement your children's education when they were in school? And were they in private school or public school?
Okay. They were in public school. And what kinds of things we were doing? We were doing everything from, I'll give you one example of what we did that was very key and we thought was very important, was giving them a way of reading books that they could avoid a lot of the white supremacy that is inherent in a lot of books.
Mm.
So for, a lot of the reading that's done, and when we started homeschooling like 10 years ago, there were a variety of books for Black children, of children of color, but there were not that many. Really, the resources were a lot fewer than they are now. Now there's a lot of children's books. At that time, there weren't that many. And we taught our children to learn to read early. We were really pushing literacy, and they were ready to learn. So the fact that a lot of our education is done in books, and reading is supposed to be something you do for pleasure and for learning, and we wanted them to have that culture for reading, but we realized that a lot of what's in books is not necessarily, we don't want you to pick up everything.
Mm-hmm.
So one example, we were at the video store one time, and my son was like looking at the video covers, and he pointed to the video cover, and it had a blonde little girl on it, and he said, she has very pretty hair. And I thought, I was like, okay, but he had never mentioned about anyone else before. It wasn't something that he would go around noticing and picking up. And I was like, yeah, why do you think that? And he was maybe 6, 7, and he just said it was because it's so blonde, and all these things that you pick up from reading books. Because when you look at the pictures in many books and movies, and the blonde girl is supposed to be the pretty one,
Right.
and the blue eyes is supposed to be the good person. Even in cartoons, they will have blue-eyed animals,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the good ones, and the ones with the brown eyes are not good, or the darker ones. So
It's true.
I started to pick up on he's picking up on it, and he's talking about it, and I noticed that. And so, and then my daughter had done a similar thing with one of the events in school, that they were given a choice of things to pick, and she picked one of the little white dolls as her option. So that was when I was like, okay, nope. Because I had thought I was conscious. I thought I was really doing my best to show different things, and I thought, okay, I obviously, we haven't done a good enough job.
Yeah, but it's so difficult. It's not even like it's just you're failing at,
Yeah.
Showing this types of, imagery to your children. It's just, there's just so much other.
Right. They're inundated.
Everything.
They're
Everything.
That's other. From
Yes.
the books to the billboards to the classroom to the teacher.
Yes.
Everything gives us this feeling of being other. And even though we do our best to give the, to promote ourselves as not being other, that there's nothing wrong with us, The way we are, the way we talk, the way we look, the way we walk, all these things are fine, but so many things tell us opposite. And it's really difficult to, just get them to be comfortable and aware.
Yes.
And
You see, and that's the thing, you want them to be, okay, you want to say, that, you don't want to say, no, that's ugly, and that's
Right.
So you want to do it in a way that's saying, okay, I want you to be aware of what's happening, because I've never seen you say that about a little black girl or boy or anything,
Mm-hmm.
So one of the tools, going back to what we did, was we created a tool, and they were young, but we created a tool for reading books. We said, hey, okay, guys, we're going to look for what we called tags. Let's look for tags. Tags are things in books that give you information that they don't necessarily say in the story. A tag would be, if you're blonde, you're good. If you're dark, you're bad. We picked out certain tags. Or if you're a girl, you can't do these things. And if you're a boy, you only do these things. We set out a certain number of things, and we said, okay, when we read the books, let's answer these questions. And we had a set of 8 questions. So it was also literacy. We're saying, okay, what is the main point of the story? First of all, we wanted to get the main point. So we said, what is the main point of the story? Who is the main person in the story? How does the book support that? Give me some examples of how you figured out that was the main point. Then the last question was, what were the tags in the story? Were there any tags in the story? So we did this for every book we read. Oh, look at this, what's a tag? And what happened? Is it only the girl that did this, or did the boy do that, or is it only the white person who did it, or were there other colored people in there? And what did each of them do? We sort of we worked on this for them to understand when certain messages were being sent to them that aren't that they can pick out. So to make them analysts, so we kind of made them detectives for finding these different things in the story. So it gave them a frame of reference, of a framework for how to read books, so that they could not just understand the main point. What is the main point of what they're teaching you, which is what is an essential part of reading anything. But did you notice any little tags in there from the pictures or the actions?
Okay, so I'm gonna pause right here. All right, so that is awesome. So you talked about a son and daughter. How many kids do you have?
2.
Okay. And when you were teaching different grades and age groups, what are some things that you would say really helped you be able to toggle between the 2 children somewhat? Because I think some parents who have multiple kids, it can be kind of challenging when they have an older sibling and a younger sibling.
Okay. My children are 3 years apart, and I would give them, let's say we did something on comprehension or story. Let's say we wanted to focus in on the story. I would give them different questions to answer, and for the story, depending on what their strengths were, their strengths are. So I would expect something different from one than I would from the other.
But
the same
discussions.
What's that?
What's that? So you would discuss the same book with both of the children.
Sometimes we would do that, yes. Sometimes we would do the same book and then they would answer something different. Other times they would just have their own books that they're reading, especially because sometimes they need different things. A lot of times the different children will need something different.
Right.
For their interests, also for where they are and where they need to be. And we would work with each of them independently. So while one is doing something, reading, I'd be working with the other with their writing or with the particular assignment they were working on. And if they had to wait, I would have books that they could look through or something else that they could be doing while I finished working with one of them.
Okay. Awesome. It sounds like reading was a really big part of your homeschool experience,
I was going to ask.
which for us, I think it is a big part of our homeschool experience as well, and many homeschoolers. So you talked about different tips and tricks that you use to help your kids really refine their reading comprehension skills and really be able to kind of delve into the material. As they grew older, how did you continue to foster their love for reading?
Those are good questions. First of all, I guess reading, we focus on that a lot because we believe in, or the idea that someone can learn on their own. I think is a very important aspect of what we want to impart, so that if you want to know something, you have to know how to research it, find it, and a lot of it is found in books, or even nowadays you can watch it in videos. But the idea was learning how to learn.
Yes,
I like it.
That was why we were focusing on that a lot. Your ability to just learn something, whether it's been given to you or not. Sorry. Now, what was the last part of the question?
So how did you continue to foster that love for reading as they grew older?
Well, going to the library was a big deal for us. We had a lot of fun doing it, and it was kind of a big deal, going and getting books. And so they enjoyed the whole process a lot, and they just got into it. And the fact is that my husband and I are also readers, so we were also reading our own books, and so they also fell into that as well, because we did it, and that was what we spent a lot of time sort of also the funness of the trips and the selecting books. We spent a lot of time, my husband and I would read most of their books with them as well, so that we could also have those discussions about the book while knowing exactly what they're reading.
I love what you just brought up, because I feel like there's a lot of families who want their children to be readers, but if you want your kid to do something, you have to model that behavior.
Right.
And you just talked about you and your husband were readers. So for children to see their parents reading, it's like just second nature to pick up a book.
Right.
And so I love that you brought that up, because if you want to raise a reader, you should be a reader.
You should be a reader too. Exactly.
I agree. Even if you're not really a reader, you have to at least let your children see you reading something sometimes. It can't be you just reading the words on the commercial on the TV. You got to actually have a book or a magazine, something, and be engaging with it on some occasions, because then they think, oh, my mom does it, my dad does it, I want to do it too. What are they doing? You can invite them to your own space and let them read something with you, which is probably, I don't know if that's the best way, because we tend to enjoy more dull things according to them. The children are like, no, mommy, I don't want this.
Yeah, and I think because there's enjoyment in that, and you read the same books they're reading, and you can have that conversation about their favorite author or favorite, protagonist, or the plot. It also adds to the different things you can talk about and sort of develop a relationship about.
Right. It builds connection.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it does.
It's wonderful, because with homeschooling, the true benefit of it is really that personal connection that you wouldn't otherwise get if you're only looking for someone else to do that academic fulfillment. So when you have that firsthand knowledge of what your kids are learning, you can kind of interweave different lessons throughout the day, regardless of what you're doing, just in everyday life. And that helps deepen the impression, but it also helps you as a family learn how to communicate better, learn how to grow, learn how to, get past challenges and different things. So it's there's so many benefits that arise from reading together and doing things together in a homeschool setting.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that.
So I think that was a great segue to our next question. So you talk a little bit about you and your husband being readers. What is your background that really gave you that confidence to homeschool your kids?
Yeah. It's one of those things sometimes we say, if I had known what I knew now, would I have still done the same thing? Sometimes, let's go back to why I decided. So my background is I grew up in Kenya, and I came here when I was 18, I suppose, 18, 19, to go to college. And in Kenya, everything was very academic. Everything is just very, very academic, and there's high stakes examinations, and so studying and being rigorous in your academics is like very, very important, because if you fail the exam, you fail out of the system.
No.
Which locks you out of the idea of progress. The idea that education, your academic education, was your springboard
Right.
to a bright future was instilled in us. I don't believe that now. I don't have that full belief at all. But at that time, that's and even now, that's the message that is sent to students. So you feel that if you don't pass, you've let the whole family down. Your future's not going to be bright. You won't have access to opportunities. But that was a very real feeling growing up. So academics was the top priority, and so I came from a very a background of a lot of studying and studiousness. Not so much reading, though. It wasn't so much. It was reading, and it was more studying to pass the exam. Because the education system was set up that if you don't pass the exam, it was high stakes testing. The exam was everything.
Right.
So that was the fallacy of the whole thing. If your parent died on the day before the exam and you took it and you failed, then that was it.
Wow.
You failed out, or you'd have to repeat your whole year again in order to do the testing when it came up again the next year.
Oh man.
So having said that, when I came here, I was very much. I found everything very easy. I was like, what? This is so easy. All that, everything was easy to me. And I passed. I did well academically in college. That is not to say that I was doing well, emotionally and socially, in the sense of, I had it all together. I just knew how to study, and I knew how to give back what you gave me.
Mm-hmm. And what were you studying?
I did hotel restaurant management, and institutional management, and geology as a minor for my first degree. Yeah, so I felt academically sound, and there is an idea. And my husband, he was born in his parents are Jamaican. He was born in England, and then he went to Jamaica for a few years, and he came here. He was probably 8 years old when he came here from Jamaica, but he had experienced the rigor of academics, even from from other parts of the world. Things are much more rigorous than they are in America.
Right.
So there's always that idea that school in America is easy, from people from outside. However, so when it came to what I saw the children studying, so where we were living when we had our children, the school they went to was what they call now can I remember? It's a school that is a failing school, basically. What do they call there's a name that they give to these schools?
Is that the Title I schools?
Title I school, yes. Title I, and it had a very high immigrant population, which meant it had a very strong ESL program.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Which I didn't have a problem with all those things. I was like, okay, so long as they're learning, that's important. But I found that things were going very slowly in school. I just felt that you're still on that. You're still on that. Okay. And what did you do in math? Oh, we did this. Then this happened and that happened. And I just thought it was just going really, really slowly. And so I felt, well, I can teach this. I can teach. I've already been teaching you this. I can teach this part of this. faster than they're going at school. And what happened was, my children, because we had spent so much time learning at home, they were really, really fast. They already knew how to do most of the things from kindergarten and first grade. So they were ahead of the ball game, which led to them feeling kind of bored in school, which led to them also being outcast in their own way. And also because we didn't have a TV at home, they were sort of outside of everything that was happening with children in terms of the cool things, what everyone was talking about, the games, so they really felt like outsiders. Okay. And because of all of that, we just felt that it wasn't working. It wasn't a good fit for them, and it kind of put them in a position where they were on the honors list and all these things, but at the same time they didn't have a good social experience. They were always being teased, or always one way or another. And then there was also the arrogance that came in of being really ahead of the game, kind of feeling like we know all this stuff and they don't know anything. So we felt that that's not what we wanted. We didn't want them to feel arrogant. We didn't want them to be outsiders. All of these things became things that we were very cognizant of. We didn't want for them to develop. Does that make sense?
Yes, most definitely.
So you really don't. Yeah. So we pulled them out, and we kept telling them, it's hard to tell children. If anyone had spent as much time as you have reading and doing the different things, they would have been at the same place you are. It's not as if you're special here in that way. It's just that they don't do the same things necessarily. So there's no reason to be feeling so advanced when you're not. When you're not.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? We didn't want that. So
right. I think you brought up several points. One of the points is socialization. People often equate homeschooling with a lack of socialization, and for you to bring up that your kids weren't socializing while they're in public school is a key factor, because people fail to kind of take into account that in school, different kids get labeled different things, and the social interactions vary. They vary. And so if your kids weren't necessarily accepted by their peers, they're going to be isolated, and that's going to have a detrimental effect on them. It could. And so,
and it did. It could, and it did in this instance.
So when you pulled them out and you intentionally started to kind of curate their social activities, how did you see their personalities and their confidence change?
Well, it took a while because my son was going into 6th grade, and he felt teased a lot, and so we had a lot of I don't know, debugging, deschooling,
deschooling,
yes.
Things to do. Honestly, I mean, we had a lot to do, and it's sort of, and also I think bringing in the aspect of we can bring that up later. But what I was saying is that we had a lot of deschooling to do, and it improved over time, over a long time of really discussing it and really explaining it. In fact, I think maybe the past 2 years when I've actually seen it really improve a lot, get a lot better.
And I want to stop you there just for a second, because I think what you're saying is so important, because as homeschoolers, we often look for instant changes.
Yeah.
Because we're like, well, I'm with them all the time. What I'm doing should be rubbing off.
Right.
No.
Right. And so what you're saying is you have to observe, you have to analyze, you have to evaluate, you have to be patient. The key is to wait, and it will be revealed.
Honestly, you are so right about that. You have to and just because you're homeschooled doesn't mean everything's perfect.
Right.
It doesn't, honestly, put it on the table. It's not. You have a lot of things that you have to think about, and at the end of the day, you can't just say, "Oh my gosh, that school system did this to my child." At the end of the day, you say, "Well, I homeschool, so I pretty much I'm accountable for what I have produced, for what has come out of my situation." And the that kind of pressure is also can be quite it's difficult sometimes to deal with that, where you're dealing with hopefully, you might see your child may not be doing as well in a certain aspect, and you might blame yourself or blame them, or you have to sort of, you want to actually not blame anyone, but really just do your best to figure out what the issue is and then solve it the best way that you can.
Yes.
Yes. That's, yeah.
It can be overwhelming.
I mean, because
sometimes it can.
The teacher's doing the exact same thing that you're doing. They just have a piece of paper that says that they're better at doing it than somebody else because they got taught by
because they have a certification,
right?
Well, that's the thing. And actually, to go back to your question before, I also have a master's in international education development that I went back to, which is I went back to education school, right? To do that. To what they call Teachers College. So I also had studied curriculum development, and I'd also thought about it before, and that sort of kind of gave me more confidence, because I'd say, well, I already know what they're learning in Teachers Colleges, so I can do the same. I've done it. I can do the same thing that they're doing as well.
Did you did you get your master's before you started homeschooling, during homeschool, or after?
Before.
Okay.
Before I even had children, I had gotten that master's.
Okay.
Ooh. Well, since you have gone there, so you've done some studies with curriculum development. So did you do that because you wanted to create the AfriVentures, the Maroon Life Learning Company, or was that just AfriVentures was like the next step from being in the curriculum planning?
Yeah. So I had the idea before I went into do my master's that I wanted to change the education for Black people. I wanted to do that. That was my thing. I was like, this is just too much. I just found that the education we were getting and was just making things worse for Black people all around the world, globally, because it's coming from you'd think that people in Africa learn a lot of African history, but we don't. The history that we learn is, in general, this is of course a big generalization, but most of the countries that are coming out of colonialization have just been using the colonial style curriculum. Even last year when I went back to Kenya, people were like, they don't learn anything about the bigger African story. Most of the story begins when Kenya became a country, which, and for most African countries it's like this. It begins when you became a country, which means that was your colonial experience, because the countries that are there now were created at the Berlin Conference.
Right. With the boundaries being drawn.
Yeah, with the boundaries being drawn. So the history really begins then, and most people, even when I went there, I had the opportunity to speak to a wide variety of people. They didn't know anything. When I was telling them about things that Africans were able to do thousands of years ago, they were like, what? We need this, and they just never learned it in the system. So coming from, and then when I was here after, meeting, sort of interacting with a lot of different Black people from all over the world, I was just like, and talking to them about their educational experiences and all the different things we've experienced, I found so much similarities, and I thought, we need to begin to change this on a global level. So that was my initial reason for going there. I felt that even though I had many ideas, I felt that it would be easier if I had the master's to get acceptance from a wider audience, because people tend to listen to people with degrees rather than people who don't, but who may know a lot. So
right, because then it gives you the authority to say, people feel like you're an authority figure.
There you go. People feel yes.
Right.
It's social currency. It's called what they call social currency.
Yes.
So yes, and anyway, that was why I did that.
So can you tell us a little bit more about Afro-Ventures?
Yes, I certainly can. So after some time, we came up with, my husband and I came up with classes that we thought, well, this is what's missing. Let's try and come up with classes for children. Initially, I was thinking of doing classes for teens and adults, but he was like, let's focus on younger ages. And I thought, okay. So we came up with, what we've done is we've looked at a lot of the books that have been written by Black scholars that have brought out a lot of the Black history that was hidden or unspoken about in many of the white books, books written for Western history, where African history has been sort of like a footnote, sort of been added into the Western history part of their great expansion and the great what do they call their colonial expansion. We're part of that in the history books, but we don't stand outside of them in general. So I read a lot. We read a lot of books by like Dr. John Henrik Clarke, by Dr. Adam van Sertima. And, when I was reading this, I was reading this for the first time. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? How is this even possible that nobody knows these things? Nobody knows that Africans were traveling to the Americas way before there was even, someone called Columbus. And that Columbus actually got the maps that he used from the Moors who had been sailing. And, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. What kind of a world are we living in that we believe these stories that are partially told? And when you really look into it, the information is actually there, but we just don't find it and bring it out.
Yeah, we don't know where to look. A lot of us don't know where to look to begin.
Or we don't have time. A lot of us don't have time. We're so busy just trying to live and raise our families, and we don't have time. And most of the stuff, I would look in the Ivan Van Sertima's book, and then I would go in the back and look at the bibliography, and then go get the books that are in the bibliography and look at those. And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much information. So if you go to the bibliographies that they have in their books, oh my goodness, it's a gold mine. So much information. It's extensive. It is extensive. And so once I started to do that, I thought, oh my gosh, this is just, we have a responsibility. So I've said, okay, we have a responsibility. Let me do this. And so we looked at those books and we said, how would we teach this to kids? How we're reading it now as, in our adulthood, but these are academic papers. These are academically written research books that even maybe people who from high school or whatever may not read and fully comprehend. So we just thought how to distill it and make it into something that we can teach to children. And so that is what we did. The Afri classes, I'm calling them now Afri classes. The Afri Ventures are going to be something different. So the classes are those books distilled into information that children can pick up. And as a result of what we've been doing, the children feel empowered, they're inspired, determined, and educated on the power of their heritage and culture, so that they understand their worth, in a world that doesn't always project that to them.
Yes.
So
I love what you're saying, because this month, I know that it's a podcast, so when people are listening, it may not be Black History Month then, but at the time of this recording, it is Black History Month. And one of the things that you brought up is that when people often talk about history, they usually bring it up from the point of colonialism and after that part of the world. They don't necessarily identify the rich history that came before colonialism, which, when people were in Africa, they were scholars, they were doctors, they were lawyers, they were bookkeepers, they were map makers, they were scientists,
astronomers,
engineers.
Yes.
And so what you have kind of touched on is why it's so important when we talk about Black history, not to begin with slavery.
Yes.
And to go beyond that. And so for parents who weren't taught themselves, it's like you do have to do some research. You do have to explore on your own, because there were explorers before Amerigo Vespucci. What's his name? Vespucci or something like that. It's
yes, exactly.
It's like, who they tell you in school isn't the beginning. And so if you're trying to learn history and you're looking for a history book, you can't look for something that has already existed for you. Sometimes you have to go beyond that experience to find your own history. And so I think with what you're doing with the classes, you're giving people permission to kind of deep dive into learning in a way that is beyond what they have ever been taught. And I think that is so important. Last podcast, we talked about, in podcast 24, episode 24, we talked about self-directed learning. And so what you're saying is just another avenue of self-directed education, so that it empowers the parent who is guiding their children. We can't always teach lessons. We're really guiding them to the information. And so you're saying, I've already distilled this information. Here's some powerful information in bite-sized. It's bite-sized so that you can analyze it, you can learn it, you can share it. And so we've done the research for you to help you on your journey as you learn how to research on your own.
Right, because that's like it.
Boom. That's it.
Yeah.
So I love that, because in the homeschool groups, you often hear people, I want to teach my children about my heritage. I want them to have confidence. I want them to have a rich learning, but I don't know where to start. And so you are telling them where to start. It's like, look, these going in the back of the books and looking at the bibliography, you don't have to just take his word for it. You don't have to rely on his story. You can change that narrative yourself.
Absolutely. That is exactly what it is. And the thing is, it's a stance. It's sort of saying, what are we going to do? We see this. What are we going to do about the situation that we're in?
Yes.
And when you talk about history, I believe that history is about choices. We're making history right now.
Right.
Yeah.
By every choice that we make. And that's what I try to say. We want to give our children, like you're saying, direct them, but give them enough to make the right choices for the conditions that they've been born into.
Right.
And, so we're born into these stories, into these situations. How do we, it's our job as parents and as the older generation to give the younger ones tools, successful tools to deal with the situations that they may face on a day-to-day basis. And at that moment when you have to make a choice, that choice, you see your child say something or make that snap decision, you want to give them enough strong experiences and knowledge from which to pull from when they have to make a decision in life. So hopefully we're partnering with parents to be able to say, you can springboard from this, but we want your children to feel excited about the history. We want them to have as positive experience as they can when they experience it. Even if they don't remember everything, it's that they remember the positive association with being African, with what it means to have an African history class, or what it means, that positive experience is so much more than we had, when we were coming up. So we want to make sure that we don't start them at the same place that we started.
Right, because it goes way back beyond that. So, and with the AFRI classes, are they only dealing with history, or do we have some other subjects that we are getting into as well?
Oh yeah. Okay. So basically, we have African history class and we have African-centered science. We have two of those, two classes of African-centered science. But in the history class, it's so much more than what you would consider just the dates and names and places that history is usually associated with. telling stories. We include, geology, geography, stories about people, the ancient stories that people had in ancient times. We talk about how the earth has impacted us, and how we impact the earth, and how the stars impact us, and how how we have learned from that. So it's much bigger than just dates and names and places. It's a full experience.
That's wonderful, because I know growing up, I went to a private school and it was all Black, and it was everything was very Black. I mean, every day was Black History Month. It was, I mean, so for English, I remember we would learn, it was called choral reading, and we had to recite together poems and epics and things. I remember doing the creation, and the teacher wanted us to say these words to break the bread of life. And I just remember that she kept making us go over and over, break, break. And these were the kinds of things that we used to do. And I remember feeling proud of being a Black person, as a African child, that there wasn't anything wrong with me or any of my friends with the way we did anything, or the way we wore our hair, or all of these things were okay. And it kind of, I know everyone hasn't had this experience, but it just, for myself, to grow up knowing that we have a very deep and rich cultural experience here, and that goes, across the Atlantic back home. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to try to continue that legacy and put that into children, so that they can also feel, okay. Because really, there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with us.
And we don't even
something wrong with us because you didn't put the verb here, or everything. We're always under attack. We're always being policed. If she wasn't talking like that, then this wouldn't have happened. You follow the rules, but then they tell you, oh, but there was another one you forgot about. It can be very stressful. It is very stressful. And I think that knowing these things can really do a lot to make our children feel more grounded and more safe and
balanced.
Yeah.
And whole.
Yeah.
Because, in a society where people sometimes do cause those differences and they often bring them up, kids just want to be kids. Kids just want to live. And
right.
So if you grow up in an environment where being you is normalized, that unfortunately in this day and age is unusual if you are a child of color. And so for you, how did you help your kids develop that confidence to kind of be teenagers that are thriving?
How do we do that? We really focus on we really take that idea of know thyself to heart. Okay. The ancient Kemetic saying of know thyself, we really take that to heart and spend a lot of time talking about through literature, through all of our experiences. We sort of have a homeschool that is very we use a lot of stories, and then we talk about them, write about them, movies, and then we write about them and try to recreate it. And through the writing process, and it shows where we are with our process, which means we talk about it in depth. Like, why did your character do that? Where did you get that information from? Or why do you feel that this ought to happen? So in that, everything that we study comes back to the person and why they're coming at it from that angle, why so that we really get to understand ourselves, our real innate, why do I make those choices? What is my thought pattern that makes me do do this X, Y, or Z.
Mm.
It's a very intense process, but very meaningful. And for me, it's very powerful. For me to do it for myself or to do it with them, we learn a lot about each other and our processes and sort of how to be in the world so that we can be we can thrive, basically. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes,
Perfect
it does.
Good. Yeah, it's hard for me to explain it, but that is what we do.
Yeah, it is. I think for most parents, that's kind of what they're trying to do. I think a lot of us may not be doing it um, purposefully, and that it's kind of happening haphazardly, which is probably why we have adults and children who aren't totally comfortable with themselves, and they don't really know themselves or why they work the way they work or do the things
Yeah.
that they do. But by you purposefully and intentionally taking time to get into that part of the psyche and understanding of self, it does, help for just showing up in the world.
It really does. It makes you think through, you know, the things that you do. So, and why. And I think a lot of times when I was growing up and sort of, it's taken me also a long time to get to that point where I can really do that work for myself. But I think it's really important to develop that inner knowing and understanding yourself. Therefore, then you can understand everything else
Mm-hmm.
because you're more cognizant of seeing everyone as a spirit or a person who has their own stories that they're coming with, that
Mm-hmm.
you're a whole person coming with your stories. How do you interact and how do you create positivity in the world through that understanding?
Awesome. So, the time goes by so quickly, so we are going to wrap it up. And for one of our final questions, for the mom and the dad who is trying to stay the course, and right now they find homeschooling is rather challenging, and they don't, they're scared. What piece of advice would you give that mom and dad who wants to homeschool their kids, but they feel like they're scared they'll mess something up, or they're afraid to continue because their kid is, getting older, maybe in high school? What type of advice would you have the struggling parent who wants to a part of them wants to homeschool and the other part of them is scared?
That's a really good question, because I've been there many times. And I think that what has sort of helped me is sometimes when things are getting really difficult, even when I'm teaching my kids, I find that it's something that you don't know. There's something missing in what you know. And a lot of homeschooling, being a homeschool parent, really is also about your own personal growth. It's a huge part of it is about your own personal growth and the growth of your family together. So I would say, and it really, and this is general information, but I would say the fear is something that is natural. Try to really go into and understand. Now, one thing is really think, if I take them into school, what are they going to get? What is it going to give them that I'm not? To really think about the classroom settings, what happens in classrooms. I've been into many schools. I've taught in schools as well. How much time does the teacher really have to give to the different children? And sometimes everything is slowed down because you had to deal with people not listening. You have to deal with disciplinary problems. There's a lot of things that go on in schools that the children, the greater curriculum of everything else going on in schools, what is informing them as well, not just the academics that you feel you may not be able to give them. Academics are not everything, and what is the most important thing is making sure your child is a whole person, that they personally are doing well as a person. So if you're getting A's, it doesn't mean your child is doing well. People always confuse it. How's your child? Oh, they're getting all A's, they're doing all this. That doesn't mean the child is doing well.
Right.
The whole child. So really, really think about the whole child, and really understand that you can do this. If you need to get tools, go ahead and find different tools. Go to a class, get help, get someone to come in and do a particular subject you don't have, or go on the internet. One thing is to go and scope out what do they need for that subject. Really scope out, look online, or find out what do you want them to know in physics, for example. A lot of people are afraid to do physics or sciences or math sometimes.
Right.
Look at it. Just see what is it, subject by subject, topic, chapter by chapter. What do they need to know according to the system by this time? Because you also remember, you're also going by what you think the system wants them to know.
Right.
So this is a question. It's a very in-depth question, and I don't know if I'm answering it fully, but
You
really
are.
do your research as the parent. Really look into what it is that they will need to know, what you think you want them to know, and then take it step by step. Take it chunk by chunk. Say, this week we're going to do this, and if I need help, I'm going to try and enlist the help of such and such a person. Find out around you who can help you. Go online. A lot of things that I look up. I'll look up, the math concepts. I'll be there, trying to figure out, well, if it's something I'm rusty on or I never did, I'll look it up and really try and find out what's happening in that topic. And then I'll have a clearer idea of where it needs to go from where we are. Because you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
If you just take the time to think about it in a big picture. And if you find you can't, that's fine too. Honestly, that's fine too. If you feel that is something you can't do, then think of how the best way for your child to get your child's needs met in an environment that you would want them to be in. So if the school is not really the best place, be creative. Yeah. School is not everything. Think of different ways that it can happen. Getting a tutor, getting someone, there are many ways to make this happen.
There are.
Oh, well, you've said so many different tips, and I mean, it's just been such a rich conversation. So we appreciate you taking time with us. I feel like we definitely didn't get to ask you all the questions that we have. So we definitely would love to have you back again for a conversation, because I just feel like for, both of us, we homeschool our kids. And I feel like hearing from others who have been at this longer than we have, it's just an enriching experience.
Very encouraging.
Yeah.
I would love to talk with you again anytime. I would love it. And even outside of the podcast, please, we can talk as well.
Yes, thank you so much. Please tell everybody where they can find you and sign up for your classes.
Okay, sure. We're at www.maroonlifelearning.com. That's Maroon, MAROON, Life Learning, all one word. And my email address is maroonlifelearning@yahoo.com. I'm also on Facebook at Maroon Life Learning. And so please, inbox me there, write to me there, or email me. Any of those is fine.
Okay, and everybody, we will put all of those links in the show notes. So definitely check out the show notes.
Say really quickly that we have an early bird special that will end on the 23rd. Of this month. So please, if you want to, get in on that, please do. Please do.
Okay, so we will put a link to that in the show notes so that you guys will have it. And we thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you so much. Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry, I should have said this before. So when do classes start? Since you just said we've got an early bird special, when are we starting with the classes? Let's get the people interested and get them there so they can come.
March 23rd.
Bring our babies.
Yes, March 23rd, they begin their online classes, so you can take them from the comfort of your home. March 23rd is the first day of classes, and it's 11.
Okay. Boom. Awesome. So we're definitely going to have to share some teasers so that everybody will get this before time. So we're going to share some teasers. We have a couple social networks. So we'll definitely be sharing that because we want people to take advantage of this opportunity.
Indeed.
Thank you so very much for having me. I'm so honored and so grateful.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We'll be talking again soon.
Okay.
Okay, so we are back. We just wanted to give you guys this really cool promotion. Can you share the promotion with them?
Yes, the promotions, we're extending the early bird special for anyone who listens to the podcast or comes to the Cleverly Changing website. There's a special promotion for you. We're extending the early bird special by a week, so you have a chance to get in. And when you come in, you'll have the code Cleverly Changing. If you use that code, you'll get the extra discount, the 15% off, much later than the actual cutoff for the early bird special.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Njeri. We thoroughly enjoyed this time that you have shared with us and cannot wait to have you back.
So did I. Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it too.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.